Hey guys, it's Alexis and welcome back to my channel. So today, as promised, my first video, well, not first, but first official video is gonna be on the Rodney Reed case. So this case has been getting a lot of media coverage recently. Kim Kardashian recently took it upon herself to take the case in her hands, and she has been working on it. But I'm just kind of going to give you a summary, not a detailed overview, with background and all that. I'm going to give you as much information as I could gather on the case and kind of what I think about it and what might go on, what should go on. Pretty much my opinion and all the history that I've managed to gather and all the research I've managed to do. If you want a more detailed video kind of with background, suspects, everything under the sun, I will put that on the link below. Her name is Bella Fury. She did a video on this and I got some information from her, if not a lot of the information I have right now, but I did have to branch out to other sites and stuff like that for other information. But anyways, let's jump into it. If you see me reading, I'm just reading off my notes because obviously I don't know everything off the top of my head. So Rodney Reed has been convicted of abduction, rape, and strangulation of Stacey Stites. Stacey Stites was a 19-year-old and they both lived in Bastrop, Texas, and he was convicted officially on April 23rd of 1996. Just to give you a little more information on the town, Bastrop, Texas, obviously back in 1996, was still very racist, and most of them were. It was still kind of separated, and the poorer side was mostly with African Americans, and the side that was a little bit more middle class and stuff like that was obviously kind of whites and all that good stuff. So during the time of this whole thing going down, Stacey was planning a wedding. So she was to get married to her fiance, soon-to-be husband, Jimmy Fennell. Now, Jimmy Fennell was a police officer and he lived with her in this apartment. He had a red Chevrolet pickup truck, and that is the car that she used to drive to work. She did have the option of taking her mother's car as well, as she didn't have her own car because, they were trying to save money for the wedding and planning stuff, but it was just very unreliable car. It would break down, and she'd just rather take Jimmy's car to work. She worked at a store called HEB's. It was a grocery store, so she would get up at around 5. No, she would have to be there. She would get up and then she'd have to be there by 5 a.m. and she would meet her co-worker in the parking lot every morning, just because it was the crack of dawn and they wanted to make sure that they were safe and together before they went in and went ahead. Now, it's important to know that Stacey was almost never late, and she was kind of always on time. Just to give you a little bit more background information, she normally wore her name tag, the HEB's name tag. She wore her blue pants, a belt, and a white shirt. And that was kind of her getup, and some sneakers, some shoes to wear to work. That was kind of her uniform. So she would go in at 5:23 a.m. was kind of around about what time she would be there in the parking lot walking into work with him already. Now to fast forward a little bit, her colleague, her co-worker who always waited for her in the parking lot, had been waiting for a while, and Stacey was never late. He found it a little bit odd, so he waited for her a little bit. He thought maybe she's just running late or something. Obviously it wasn't traffic, because what traffic is there going to be at 4 or 5 in the morning? And she didn't live too far. It was a 5-10 minute drive at most from HEB's, and it was a quick drive, especially because it's the middle of the night. Not the middle of the night, but early morning. For me, it's the middle of the night. And he waited for her for about 40 minutes or so, and when she didn't appear, he decided to go in and just start working and see if maybe she would call out sick or she would come in later that day. So approximately 2 hours after 5:23 a.m., he called Jimmy and asked her, if you recall, Jimmy is her soon-to-be husband, and called him and said, have you seen Stacey? I haven't heard of her. And he was like, what do you mean? She left for work this morning. She should be there already. Now, this was 2 hours after, 5:23, so it's like 8 o'clock a.m. And around this time, a lot of people are saying, well, why didn't the coworker call immediately and say, where's Stacey if she's never late and she's never not at work? You have to kind of put yourself in those shoes. If your coworker doesn't come to work one day, are you gonna go crazy and call the police? No, like they might be out sick, they might just be coming in late, maybe somebody else knows something that you don't. So it's not really his fault that he didn't call immediately. At around the same time that he called Jimmy to kind of figure out if he knows where Stacey has been, Jimmy's red Chevrolet pickup truck was found in the parking lot of Bastrop High School. I was gonna say Bishop. Bastrop High School was kind of like in the middle between her going to work and her house, and it was just found in the parking lot. A police officer was called on the scene. Somebody said, hey, what is this pickup truck doing at the school? And it's the only one there, and it's like 6 a.m. or 5 a.m. It was like the wee hours in the morning, and it's important to know that it was a weekend. So it's like, what is anybody doing at school around a weekend? From here, this is what gets me so mad. The police officer that arrived on the scene opened the pickup truck or whatever and started kind of looking around. But the thing is that the minute you put your hands on something that could be evidence, you're contaminating it, and then it's really hard to use for further investigation and anything like that. So the fact that he, kind of like tampered with the stuff in the truck, I understand he was looking for her and kind of trying to see if he could find whose the truck would be. But if I see a truck in a high school or in a middle school or whatever, and it hasn't been there for days, and it's just like, it just popped up out of nowhere at 5 in the morning, I'm not going to go ahead and just open the car and be like, oh, hey, is there anybody in here? No. I would most likely call for backup, kind of see what's going on. I wouldn't just go ahead and tamper with the evidence. So from here, it took a few hours. I don't know the exact amount of time, I'm sorry. But it did take a few hours for them to kind of connect the dots and figure out that this was Jimmy Fennell's car. Once they contacted Jimmy, they called him and said, hey, come over here and see if you recognize anything in the car, or if you recognize anything that shouldn't have been in the car that is in the car now. Upon looking in the car, he did identify a piece of a black belt, which is the black belt that she always would wear to go to work. They did identify that piece. There was not like the whole belt, it was just a piece of it. And that the seat had been like inclined back, and there was it looked like the car had been shuffled around. Obviously, your car, how it's supposed to look. For example, mine is always dirty, so if you see it clean, there's an issue. And vice versa, a person's car who's always clean, if you notice if there's a scrap in your car. So he obviously noticed that piece of belt and continued and picked up the belt. So if I see something, I see it. I don't need to touch it to see it. I don't need to use my other senses. So he went ahead and tampered with the evidence again. So it's very hard to pick up like DNA samples and test it, send it to the lab or anything, because both of the police officers on the scene tampered with the evidence. So this all happened at 7 a.m., which was the 2 hours after the 5:23 a.m. that I had said. So after 7 a.m., they started looking for Stacey frantically. This was very unlike her to kind of pick up and go. She was really predictable. It would be unlikely that she wouldn't go to work, especially if she's planning a wedding. She needs the extra money. Jimmy phoned her mom, and they started searching together, and it wasn't until a little bit after that they found her on the side of a road. A runner found her on the side of the road, and she was just kind of thrown there. It seemed like she was placed there. Stacey was found without a shirt, although her shirt was found a few miles away, kind of like scrunched up. She was found with her blue pants that she would wear to go to work still. The zipper was down and her underwear looked like they were kind of crunched up at her hips. She had a black bra on. Her hair was kind of a mess. Obviously, it looked like some type of fluid around her vaginal area. And she had one shoe on. She had her shoes on. That was how she was found, and her name tag was kind of placed around her body, and it looked like it was obviously placed because the name tag would make sense if it was on the shirt. So the fact that the shirt was taken off and was found later at a different site and that her name tag was placed there was somebody wanted them to know, hey, this is Stacey. And again, the police officer that was called started touching things around and tampering evidence. There are multiple accounts of, people, obviously the police officers and like the investigation, some of them wouldn't wear gloves. Whether it was like, when it first starts, when there's first a crime scene, everybody wants to see, everybody who's seen like, oh, what's going on, and everybody wants to go over there. But that is like the worst thing you can do, because once you tamper with the evidence, it's very hard to use and such, and it's just very like all over the place. So the fact that the police didn't handle this correctly is very important in this case, and especially that the police would also include Jimmy Fennell. Kind of backtracking a little bit back to Rodney Reed. Rodney Reed, first of all, he's been in death row since May of 1998. So right now he's 51. So he has been on death row for a few years, a lot. And it's important to have some background on Jimmy as well. An angel like Stacey was. Stacey was known as like, basically like when you saw her, you saw the halo and wings. But Rodney didn't have that same reputation. He was a little bit of a troublemaker, as all guys are and all kids are, unfortunately. But previously, before the Stacey case and everything that went down, he did sexually harass and rape some women. Off the top of my head, I don't remember, I'm sorry, but it is like 3 or 4 women that he was together with, and it was very hard to implicate him and kind of like say, you did it. So he did have some history with sexual assault, sexual harassment, and kind of raping women. And as fate has it, obviously all of this happened around Bastrop High School, where, if you recall, was where they found Jimmy Fennell's car. That's that. So you have Rodney, you have Stacey. Stacey's dead. They're kind of looking for suspects. Before they even went over to Rodney, they did test a bunch of men for semen, because there was an investigator on the scene who got there and kind of said, this looks like some type of rape issue, especially if her zipper is down and there seems like there is some kind of fluid around her pants. So they took that to the lab, tested it. It did come back positive for semen. So they started testing some suspects, and it was around 28 men. One of them was David Hans. David Hans refused to give saliva, semen, any type of DNA evidence to kind of do it. He did not want to do it. He didn't want to go through with it. So obviously this sprung up some red flags. He was one of the primary suspects in the case because he didn't want to do this. He was part of the police department. There were so many things that would implicate David to the case, and then he was convicted of kind of murdering a woman, and it bared so many similarities to Stacey and how she was found, without a top, kind of on the side of the road, looked like she was raped. It was around the same thing. This is then when David finally agreed to do the saliva semen sample, and it came back negative. It is important to know that David was very good friends with Jimmy Fennell, so that kind of went back and backtracked to Jimmy and brought kind of a spotlight on him. Because obviously with these cases, when a spouse dies, the other one is always the primary suspect, because you have to start somewhere. From here, let me tell y'all about the police. He has so much support, Jimmy, in the police department, that it's very hard to tell if any of the investigation or anything that was kind of done was as accurate as you would think it is. I don't think it was, but whatever. They obviously questioned him as they questioned the other suspects. He said, no, I was home, like she had my car, type thing, just kind of like accounting for everything. But recently there has been a discovery that the person who interrogated him at the police department said that there were many inconsistencies in his story. So that was like one of the reasons, obviously, that if that would have came back before, that would have helped Rodney a lot. But nobody wants to come forward until now, obviously. From there, that is kind of like the basis of the case. The like overview, kind of what happened, as much information as I know off like the top of my head and like as my notes. But I want to bring up some important facts and kind of things that kind of make this case now a black and white and the gray areas. So number one, the murder weapon, which was the belt because she was strangled, that's how she died, was found at the murder scene, never tested for DNA evidence. Never tested for DNA evidence. They never tested the murder weapon for DNA evidence. I don't know how many times I have to say that because that just blows my mind. The fact that they didn't think, let me grab this and test it. So that's that. What else? The belt wasn't tested for DNA evidence. I just can't stop saying it because it amazes me. Amazed. This is my face. Amazed. From that also, they do say, some speculate, and this is kind of like the number one thing that kind of came in the trial, because in the trial, Rodney's story changed. At first he said, no, I've never seen that woman in my life. I don't know who you're talking about. And then once presented in the courtroom, he did start to mention that he was having an affair with Stacey and that they were in some type of consensual in some type of affair relationship, okay? And that everything was mutual and that she wanted to have sex with him. And kind of like, that's how he knew her. Now, why Rodney was brought up as a suspect was because obviously he had all these previous sexual encounters with all these other women, and you know, the rape and the sexual harassment. So they tested his semen and it came back 98 or 99% positive that it was his. Now, semen can live in the body for around 48 to 72 hours. So obviously this did not look good for Rodney, but once he presented in the courtroom that they did have a relationship, it made sense, but it didn't. And I'll give you the facts. Obviously, a black male with a white female is hardly ever accepted. It's just now getting a little more accepted, and even then, not too much. But back in 1996, do you really think little Miss Stacey wanted everyone to know that she was with Rodney? No. So, as far as there are some suspects like Rodney's mom, one of his best friends that say that somebody that resembled Stacey, if it was her, came to the house and kind of say, hey, is Rodney here? And they said, no, he's not here. And she kind of just drove away and said, okay, thank you. And that was that. But they did say that they had seen them together and that they kind of like, that they had seen them together and they kind of ran around together. Rodney also said that it was difficult because it was an affair. So when you're having an affair, you don't want the whole world to know. And that she didn't go by Stacey. She didn't give her real name. It was either Stephanie or anything other than Stacey, because she didn't want anyone to know, especially being that Jimmy was part of the police department. Along with the speculation about Rodney having an affair with Stacey, is that if Rodney was in fact having an affair with Stacey, maybe Jimmy found out about that affair, and Jimmy is the one who actually went ahead and murdered Stacey. And with this theory, there is just so many things that implicate Jimmy. It is insane. So obviously Rodney was convicted. He was sent to death row. He's still on there. Jimmy was let loose. Later down the line, Jimmy was convicted for 10 years for kidnapping and a sex crime. Under these 10 years, an inmate said that, well, he didn't come out until recently, but he did say that while he was there with Jimmy said, you know, I ended up killing that wife of mine for having an affair with, like, a black man. And that's me putting it in the nicest words I can, but obviously he didn't say black man, and he didn't say that wife of mine. He said much more, but I'm not gonna say exactly what he said. So it's almost like he confessed to it, but being that it's coming from an inmate, and anytime something comes from prison, you know, some people unfortunately aren't always telling the truth. They just want to get out of their sentence or get, like, time reduced or whatever it is. So that's how that went down. Now to fast forward to present day, Jimmy is out loose and about and just walking, living his life, still racist as ever. Rodney obviously is still on death row. There is like a movement going on where you sign a petition and kind of help Rodney get out. I, for one, am one of the people that signed that petition because I do believe that everyone deserves a second chance. Do I believe that it's some karma for having sexually harassed and raped the woman before Stacey? 100%, but I don't think he deserves to die for it. Jimmy definitely deserves some more jail time, if it's not for his racist remarks, then for everything else he has done. But I feel like this case was just terribly taken care of with the evidence and the fact that Jimmy had so many connections in the police department that just so happened to ponder about the case and, you know, step upon it and get their hands on it. It was just a mess, and I do think Rodney is innocent, but that is just my thought about the case. He's innocent in this case specifically, and the other ones obviously not. He didn't, in like the sex crimes and the rapes. He didn't serve any time for that, so I believe that this time that he did serve for Stacey waiting on death row was kind of the time that he should have done for the other woman. But like I said before, I don't think he deserves to die for it. That being said, this case is still very, very active, and you can 100% follow it. I mean, there is like probably a new article every week on it, whether it's the New York Times or whatever it is, following about it and kind of seeing what everything is going on. If you have any more questions about the case, you can ask them down in the comments. I will answer, or just, you know, get in contact with me. I'll answer as many questions as I can. I did have more notes and I wanted this to go a different way, but I feel like as my videos keep going, I'll start storytelling or, you know, explaining the cases a little bit better. But this just was a long case, whether it was with the evidence or the suspects or anything else. It was just a long case. But like I said, I will leave the link down below for Bella's video. Her video is first of all, it's longer. It's almost an hour long. I think it's around like 50 or 55-ish minutes. She gives lots of background information. She gives lots of other information, whether it's the suspects and Stacey and Rodney and David Hans and kind of Jimmy and everyone else. She gives a lot more information regarding that. So that is more a detailed version of the case if you're interested. But as of right now, that's kind of everything I can give you and everything that my voice can give you because it's starting to give out. But my final opinion stays. I think Rodney, in this case, is innocent and he does not deserve to die. And I'm glad that Kim Kardashian has taken upon the case because she has proved to actually be good. So hopefully he is released sooner rather than later. That is all I have for today, guys. Thank you so much for watching, or at least pretending to watch, or having me as background noise. I appreciate it a lot. It's something, you know. Like, subscribe, leave comments, do a cartwheel, do a flip, send me pictures, do whatever you want. just support me in any way you can, please. And like I said, my name is Alexis. This was Life of Ma. Signing out.